Well, hello there, and welcome to November's issue of FrankieSense and More. I'm Frankie Picasso, your host, and I'm here with my co-host, Brent Marchant.
Hey, Frankie, how are you?
I'm doing really well today. Thanks for asking.
Good.
All right. So we have a few movies in our lineup today, Brent.
Yes, we do. We're right in the midst of award season movies and pre-Christmas shopping season and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff coming out, and we got a big package today. So,
all right. Well, let's get at her.
So let's get started with a film that's available exclusively on Apple TV right now, called Fingernails, which actually is kind of a quirky little romantic comedy of sorts with a little bit of sci-fi thrown in. It basically asks the question, how do we know when we're in love? And it's interesting. It's something that most of us should probably think comes to us naturally, following our gut instinct or intuition. Well, in an age when a lot of people are having more doubts about trusting their own feelings or trusting their own gut, they're turning to other means to find ways to verify this. And in this film, it's done through science. In this society, that they've developed a technique where they've discovered that love actually begins in the fingernails. Most of us think of it's in the heart, but they find it's in the fingernails. And if couples that are potentially having feelings for one another want to find out whether they're compatible, they have a test that they conduct where essentially each person sacrifices one of their fingernails.
In a rather painful process.
Exactly. I mean, talk about commitment,
It's not clipping your nails, it's taking it off your nails.
They pull the whole thing out. And they take both fingernails and they put them onto this device that they run through a machine that looks like a microwave oven. And it analyzes the fingernails and comes up with the answer whether or not they're compatible or whether they're true love or not. So there's this couple in the film that has the test done, and they come up as a match. But after some time together, one of the partners, played by Jessie Buckley, begins to think that, I'm not really sure about this. I mean, the test says we're supposed to be in love, but I don't really feel like it. So she decides to take a job at a place called the Love Institute that does these tests. And she learns some more things about herself and decides that maybe I need to have the test done again, especially when she starts developing feelings for one of her coworkers, and the feelings seem to be mutual. And she becomes bewildered about what to do, especially since the test said they were compatible, but
I mean, you be in love with two people at the same time.
Yeah. And she asks her boss, is it possible to fall in love with more than one person at the same time? And he says, oh, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Can't happen. It'd be like somebody getting pregnant and then getting pregnant again 6 months later.
Right.
But it can't possibly happen. Well, does science have the answer to everything? And that's, I think, one of the points that this film is trying to make. It's encouraging people, don't go against your own gut. Follow your own feelings. That'll give you a better indication of whether or not you're in love with somebody than whether or not you have this test done. And it's interesting because at one point, fairly early on in the movie, one of the people who also works at the Institute as a new recruit asks her boss, what if somebody has no arms? Well, if you don't have any arms, you don't have any fingernails then either. So, and the boss says, I don't know. Well, if it doesn't know then, why would it know any better if you do have the fingernails?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. And it's interesting that everybody wants to have confirmation. Did I make the right choice? Is this real? Will it last? and doesn't mean it's going to last. Maybe you're in love for a little bit of time, or for 20 years of time. And I think the movie did start like before they had the test. People used to just trust their instincts.
Yes.
Didn't always last, and so now you've got this confirmation that you can go through. And some couples do it twice. Some couples go, I don't need that confirmation. We know that we love each other. And some people like her thought, it's kind of waning. I don't know. Do we still really love each other? And her boyfriend says, I still love you. I love you as much as I've always loved you. But, I think it scared her too, to have feelings for somebody else.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing too is that the Institute also offers courses to would-be couples to see if they can sort of bolster their love for one another, their feelings for one another. And they put them through these absolutely ridiculous paces. And I mean, it again begs the question, do you have to go through things like this just to find out? I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's like all those silly shows, The Island, F-Boys and Love on the Island and even Bachelor. You're put in this intense situation, vying to love somebody that you've never met before. Like, we have to be one of the love couples. We have to be one of the love couples. Like,
exactly.
we have to fall in love. Are they in love, or are they just put in a ridiculous situation and
exactly
forced love?
And the whole absurdity behind a lot of this is very typical of the work of this particular director who made this. His name is Christos Nikou. He's a Greek director. This is his second film. And he did the same kind of thing in his first film that came out a couple of years ago called Apples, where he takes a particular subject. In that case, it was memories. In this case, it's love. And he just like turns it on its ear by putting it in an absolutely absurd setting to get people to think, saying, come on, you've got the capability to determine this for yourself. Pay attention to how you feel and what you want to do. And don't worry about what the outside world says, because it may not have the answer any more than you do. But at least if it's you trying to determine, it's coming from within you. And that's something that's really more important to bear in mind in the long run.
And I love Jessie Buckley, and Jessie has a phenomenal voice, and she just hummed a little bit of, you go, oh, Jessie, I want to hear you sing, because I just love to hear her sing. She's great. And, I felt sort of sad that she wasn't able to sing in this, because she is such a phenomenal talent.
Well, the thing that was, she had two good co-stars in this film with her as well. Yeah. I mean, her partner, played by Jeremy Allen White, and her co-worker and would-be possible romantic interest, played by Riz Ahmed. I mean, the three of them that was perfectly cast with these three. So,
and even her boss.
Yeah, exactly.
Small role for him, but still, yes. Wilson.
So I like this movie a lot, and I'm kind of disappointed to see that it's gotten sort of lukewarm reviews, but I think part of that might be due to the director's style of storytelling. He's out there to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But he's creative, and he's got a very distinctive style in terms of bringing this very imaginative way of looking at everyday questions that we all face.
What did you think of the ending? We're not going to tell you the ending. What did you think of that ending?
The ending was okay. I thought it could have been a little bit more developed than it was.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I understand where he was going with this. So he did that. He did that in his first movie also, where things maybe could have been a little bit more developed. But there's a certain wonderful ambiguity involved in some of it too. That it adds to the message of think for yourself. I'm not going to give you all the answers.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I like about his work, is that's very kind of a hallmark strategy that he uses in his films. So this is on Apple TV Plus, and
when I watched it, was it free for you?
Well, I mean, when you subscribe to Apple TV Plus, you get access to everything that they show. So,
well, no, I still have to rent some of these movies I rented on Apple, but I was shocked because it was still in the theaters when I rented it, or when I saw it on Apple TV. I was shocked that
there's a little bit of a crossover occurring with that now, because a lot of viewers still aren't ready to go back to the theaters.
Mm-hmm.
They're concerned about COVID. They're concerned about safety. They're concerned about cost.
Yeah.
So, they're making them sort of available in dual formats, but they're not doing it universally. And that's something you have to kind of go on a case by case basis with films. So,
All right.
but right now this is on Apple Plus, and I liked it a lot. I'm giving it 4.5 stars.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I liked it. I didn't like it as much as you like it. It's still a fun movie. It was
Well,
good.
I think probably part of it might be fed by the fact that I'm a big fan of this director's work. Again, after having seen this and his previous film, I think this is somebody who I think has got a really good future ahead of him. In many ways, he reminds me a lot of the Greek director Yorgos Lanthimos, who has made films like The Favorite and The Lobster, and he's getting ready to come out with another new one called Poor Things, which is getting a lot of buzz right now, especially for Emma Stone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I mean, I saw the trailer for it and it looks hilarious. So
I thought Lobster was kind of it was weird. I like weird stuff. Okay. Let's go move on to Dream Scenario.
yeah, Dream Scenario is another interesting one. That's a film that's made by a Norwegian director. It's his first feature film. And this is a terrific vehicle for Nicolas Cage. This is the story of a sort of everyday, everyman, middle-aged college professor, kind of nondescript family man. And all of a sudden, he is finding that he is showing up in the dreams of a lot of people, including many people he doesn't even know. And he's baffled by this, saying, well, what? I didn't bring this about. What's this happening for? And because he becomes so prevalent in people's dreams, he becomes a hot commodity, a media darling, and somebody who's being courted as a brand spokesperson. And he's got fans who absolutely adore him and, kind of obsess about him. And he's completely baffled by all this, but, he sort of starts to enjoy the notoriety that he's getting from this. Until, of course, the nature of the dreams start to change for a lot of people, and he turns from being benign to menacing. And all of a sudden, then the absolute opposite happens. He gets shunned. He becomes a victim of cancel culture. And he grows frustrated by this because I didn't do this either. Why are you putting this on me for? So it's a very interesting take on questions of fame. It's a questions of the impact of cancel culture. It's on the impact of social media, and all seen through the eyes of one person, which is not unusual in the experience of a lot of people of what they've gone through in relation to some of these same areas.
It's so interesting that people are this cancel culture and how quick people are to jump on that bandwagon and just, slam people for the slightest thing. I was just out and somebody had said to me, one of the politicians here, head of the NDP party, he had a bag. Like, I don't remember if it was Hermes or, a famous brand bag. And people were like jumping on him and, oh my God, he's got this bag. Like, how could you're supposed to be, a good person or something? Like, what does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with politics? How do they know where he got it? Somebody gave it to him. Is he not supposed to use it? Like, who cares? But because he has this one thing that's expensive, they're saying, oh, did you buy it with our money? Like, no. Like,
exactly.
Horrible.
And the other thing too is that when this menacing aspect of his character starts to snowball, he goes online and apologizes, saying, "I'm sorry for this. I didn't do this. I mean, I don't know where this is coming from. Yeah. I'm profusely apologetic for everything that happened," and nobody forgives him.
Yeah.
And,
you can't do it right, and you can't even say I'm sorry anymore. Like, people will not forgive you for anything. I don't know, guys. You better start thinking about your morals and.
Oh, exactly.
It's just not right.
And then this film shines a bright spotlight on this. It also gets into the idea also of people doing things to capitalize on this ability to get into other people's heads, and whether or not it's a good thing. I mean, there's a company that ends up working on trying to develop it as something that everybody can do so they can visit everybody else. Yeah. Well, is that really right either? I mean, talk about an invasion of privacy.
Yeah.
I mean, so
it's like people who go, I'm an influencer. That's your job.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Well, online.
I always laugh when I see that term about social
I
media.
know, I
Oh
know.
yeah, like as if I'm going to listen to you. I mean, come on.
Exactly. Yeah. Who the hell are you? Yeah. Like I'm an influencer. I guess
But,
we're influencers. We talk about movies, but
well, I mean, but people are free to listen to
exactly.
us or not listen to us. And I
Yeah,
mean,
like,
so often with media influencers, people seem to think like, oh, I have to listen to him because he's a social media influencer.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, fine, whatever.
Mm.
This is a film that packs an awful lot into its runtime. It's very concentrated in terms of its content and in terms of its themes, but it manages to pull it off really well by putting it all together in this package. And a big part of what makes that work is the amount of humor in this movie. I mean, this is laugh out loud funny stuff.
I love this stage.
I saw this in the theater. I mean, everybody was just cracking up left and right around me, including myself. And Nicolas Cage is absolutely perfect in this role. I mean, this is a role that was made for him. And I'm glad that he did it, because I had read in an article that this was originally cast with Adam Sandler, and I just don't think it would have worked the same way as it does with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, yeah.
It requires an actor who's really got the chops to pull off a part like this, and Nicolas Cage has it, but Adam Sandler, I'm afraid.
And you're not expecting him to be funny, and that's Adam Sandler. You expect to be funny.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And I just wanted to mention one other thing too, because talking about people going back to the theater.
Yes.
People are used to sitting at home and chatting. Well, I was at the
Yes.
theater on Saturday, and these girls were like, blah, 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 blah. Finally, somebody behind us went, would you shut up? And like, she's like, what? Like, you're not at home. You're
that's me when I go to the theater too. I mean, if people start talking, I tell them to pipe down. I mean,
come on.
If you want to talk, go home. Don't sit.
Exactly. I think they forget through the years of COVID, and sitting at home watching a movie, you can just chat. Well, you can't do that in a theater. Well, you can do it, but you're not going to get a very good response. Right?
I'm really also impressed with the fact that this is like the second really good role that Nicolas Cage has done this year, because he did that earlier in the year when he played in Renfield, where he was doing Dracula. And I'm glad to see him getting back to the kinds of roles that he's really good at playing, because he did so many years with these kind of silly action adventure movies that they were kind of hit or miss, and I think in a lot of cases he was doing it because he needed the money. And now he seems to be more selective again in terms of picking the roles that he really wants to do. And this is definitely one of them. Yeah. So if you like his work and you want to see him in a role where he's really funny, go see this one by all means, and pay attention to what the message is of this film, because it really, I think, is something that a lot of us need to hear these days. So I really enjoyed it. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5.
All right.
Okay, now in a different vein, if we're looking for inspiration, one movie I'd recommend turning to is Nyad, which is a film that's airing on Netflix right now. It's a film biography about long-distance marathon swimmer Diana Nyad and her attempts to make the swim from Cuba to Florida. And she did it when she was in her 20s and didn't succeed. And then she came back at age 60 and decided to give it another try. And it took her several attempts, but eventually she was able to make it all the way across. And the thing that was interesting is that in addition to having to developing her mindset and her physical conditioning for all this, there were other changes that she had to go through to learn how to be able to pull this off. One of which, and I find this very interesting, this is something that rarely happens in films with inspirational characters. It showed that she had to have a change in attitude also. I mean, she was very determined, but she became a royal pain in the butt to a lot of people around her. Yeah. And these are people she was depending upon for support. And if anything, over time, she ended up becoming more demanding and more single-minded, more unyielding. And, if you start to piss off the people you have to rely on, what do you think your chances are of success unless you're the one to make a change? Yeah. It's very rare to see a likable, inspirational character shown in a potentially negative light. That's a really interesting twist on
I think they showed a facet of human being, and that's the thing. I mean, she had to be so minded in her determination and tenacious to do what she was going to do. And not just once, not just twice, not just 3 times. I mean, oh my God, what she went through to try to make this happen. You have to swim 24 hours. She went through a man-of-war, population site. She did so much stuff happened to her. And yet, like you said, her very best friend, for 30 years was right by her side, but she pissed her off big time and she was ready to go. Like you have to be single-minded, but she had a team and she needed a team to do it. She couldn't pull it off without a team. They got the very best experts and team that they could for her to make it all happen. And they didn't feel appreciated.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And she had to understand, you know what? I have to appreciate these people. Like they weren't getting paid. They weren't, nothing was, like they were doing this because she wanted to do it. And everybody was on board because she wanted it. And which is a beautiful testament to them.
Yes.
To help this 60-year-old woman, make her dream come true. Many times over, they failed, but, and the expense of it. I mean, God, what did it cost? Like couple $100,000 every time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, just pulling the money to make this happen. I mean, and also the fact that she was, when she made her initial attempt in her 20s, she was swimming in a shark cage. And when she attempted at 60, she said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's essentially cheating. It's an unfair advantage to me. So she wanted to swim in open waters in an area that was known for having sharks and jellyfish and man-o-wars. How do you keep your swimmer safe under those circumstances? I mean, that took some extra work to figure that one out too.
And then on the same day that she was going to go, a young celebrated swimmer was going to attempt the same thing.
Yeah.
She didn't even get halfway. She gave up. So it just shows you that this 60-year-old woman, her mind was like a steel trap. Her mind, she was doing this regardless. She just felt, empowered and powerful. And that was beautiful to see that kind of determination.
Yes.
I don't know if it was crazy or not, but it was, she had the chops to pull it off. She really did. So, and Annette Bening is just one of my favorites.
Yeah. The star power in this film with Annette Bening is Diana Nyad, and then Jodie Foster is her best friend. I mean, the casting of those two was absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And they're both getting a lot of awards season buzz as possible nominees. I mean, the picture overall isn't looking to necessarily pick up a lot of other awards.
Yeah.
But those two performances are so good. Just so strong.
I mean, how much did did Annette have to, practice and swim and do everything with Diana to even look like she could do this and pull it off? And I know that Jodie Foster spent a lot of time with her best friend, just feeling that relationship and feeling, who she was as a person. And they both just put their heart and soul into this. I think it was an amazing, amazing film.
Now, another thing that I really liked about this too is that this is a film that focuses on 2 older women.
Yeah.
How often do you see that in movies? I mean, the sort of adage in Hollywood is that, once a woman is past 40 or 45, that's it for their career because,
and no glamour, no makeup.
No.
Nothing. Like
no.
You get wrinkles, you get whatever.
Yep.
See is what you get. And that's, the bravery of that is beyond. Really.
Yes. Well, not just in terms of the performances, but also in terms of the people who are behind the film saying, we're going to take a chance on this because we think there's an interesting story to be told here.
Yeah.
And, we're not going to be afraid to go ahead and do it. And again, they picked the right people to do the parts and carry it off. And, you give viewers an inspirational story that is not afraid to take some chances. Yeah. It also delves into an area of why Nyad became such a determined individual doing things. And it's a story that originates in her youth when she was a victim of sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. And she determined that she was not going to let anything like that ever happen to her again, that she was not going to allow herself to be a victim the way she was when she was younger. She sort of carries it a little too far. But then again, she's taken a tragedy and trauma and turned it into an asset that has allowed her to make these accomplishments take place, which, again, that's a subject that you just typically don't see addressed in movies.
The other thing is, because I've been doing a lot of writing about this particular topic lately, about women in their 60s, this feeling of being invisible to society, cast away, kind of like, you don't have any value anymore, feeling passionless ourselves just because we're getting older, and you've done a lot, been there, done that a lot, and trying to find purpose, and so all of those things too, I read into this film, and for both of the women, and thinking, what, yeah, you can get real excited when you got a project. Like I can get real excited about something. But most of the time you're just kind of like, yeah, should I start that? I'm kind of old. Is that going to work out? Will I still be here? It's difficult. It's difficult to lose your looks. It's difficult to walk in a room and feel like you're invisible. People don't care about you as much. You lose a lot of, friends because they move on or pass away or get divorced. And so it's a tough time. It's a tough time of life. So it was exciting for her. I think that's why she got so enthused too.
And I think that's a big part of maybe the appeal for the pitch behind this movie, getting it made, and the fact that this is something that's got a certain universality to it that a lot of people in that age group can understand and appreciate.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
So I really like this one. I give this one 3.5 to 4 stars.
I'm at a 4.5 on this one. I really liked it.
Well, the only thing I did, the only real criticism I had this is I felt it was a little bit on the long side. I felt it maybe could have been edited a little bit, but beyond that, I mean, I really, can't find fault with it in any other way. I mean, it's a good film.
Even the captain and the support, like they were all perfect character.
Oh yeah.
Perfect character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is it's airing exclusively on Netflix right now. So
yeah.
And speaking of Netflix, we have another film with an inspirational character called Rustin. And this is a film that tells the story of Bayard Rustin, who was the organizer of the 1963 March on Washington for the Civil Rights Movement. It focuses on his ability to get things done. And he was somebody who in many ways was would have ordinarily sort of been on the outs at that time because he was Black, he was gay, he was flamboyant, he was outspoken, and he even, pissed off a lot of people within the civil rights community himself, but he got stuff done. And that was important. That was the really important thing that people needed to see coming out of this film. He ended up in 8 weeks pulling off the biggest peaceful demonstration has ever taken place on the Washington Mall.
Wow.
They were hoping that they would draw 100,000 people. They drew 250,000 people.
Wow.
And it became an important event in the civil rights movement. It's where Martin Luther King gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. And just the level of commitment, organization, diligence that went into play in this film, when a lot of people had doubts about him.
Was Johnson president then?
No, Kennedy was still president.
Kennedy
it was a couple months before Kennedy was assassinated. But the thing is, I mean, even though Kennedy was starting to come on board more with the civil rights, he started out kind of slow with it. And, this really kind of catapulted his interest in it to try and get it moving and going forward. And Rustin is kind of an unsung hero in connection with all this. I mean, not a lot of people have heard of him.
No.
But
I never heard his name, actually.
I heard the name because he was gay, and he became a big commitment in the gay rights movement after the Washington March. But if you really weren't familiar with those particular quarters, you probably might not have heard of him. And he, like I said, he also had to battle some people within his own community. Like he was often criticized by Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, who kept saying, "I don't think you're a suitable representative for our community. You're not going to help things out." And he even almost took the steps of torpedoing his efforts simply because
didn't like him.
He was being overshadowed, things like that. But this is a really, it's a nicely made biopic, very informative. It's kind of by the numbers, but by the same token, I think it's an important story that needed to be told. It's got a powerhouse cast. I mean, the lead role played by Coleman Domingo. He's right now being very strongly considered as a Best Actor nominee for the Oscars.
Wow.
And he's supported by people like Jeffrey Wright and Chris Rock and Glenn Turman and
Wow.
CCH Pounder. I mean, just a real strong lineup of African-American performers who do real justice to the parts that they're playing. This is also one of the films to come out of the production company run by Barack and Michelle Obama.
Oh,
yeah, and I think I'm really happy to see that they felt this was an important enough story to tell, not just from the civil rights standpoint, but also from the gay rights standpoint, because Obama was initially a little soft on that as well.
yeah.
But he has come around in recent years to be more supportive, and I think this being behind this production did a lot to help, solidify that view. So anyways, I think this is an important film to watch to see who this unsung hero was. It's important for anybody looking to see what it takes to develop the inspiration and the diligence to pull off something like this.
Yeah.
And it's just very well done in many ways. I give it 3.5 stars, and like Nyad, it's another exclusive on Netflix.
Excellent. All right, let me go to our next movie.
Okay, so our next film is a little known gem that I just sort of stumbled upon recently. It's a Canadian film called When Time Got Louder, which tells the story of an autistic teenager who is in a family where he's very lovingly supported by his older sister and parents. But the family is coming to sort of a turning point in the fact that the older sister, who is really in many ways the young man's only friend, is getting ready to go away to college.
Yeah.
And she is feeling tremendous guilt over the fact that she's leaving her brother behind. But it raises an interesting question for people who are facing circumstances like this, where at what point do you want to be the good caregiver, but also attend to your own needs and your own well-being?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's say he was a nonverbal autistic child. So
Yes.
he was on the spectrum, he was in the more severe category. And, the parents had recognized in the beginning, as the siblings had developed that relationship, that she needed to have autonomy. She needed to be able to have her own life and not have a life as a caregiver. She didn't decide to be pregnant with her brother. That's not her kid, as close as they are, because they're both artists and they really enjoyed drawing together.
Yes.
Both of them were extremely talented at it. She loved her brother. She really did enjoy spending time with him and really felt this care for him. But she also never got to just be free and experience herself. And so that was, an important, part, because you've seen it in different stories. People nobody blamed her, but people kind of said, well, she'd stayed home, maybe things would have been different for her brother. But you can't pin that on a kid.
No, absolutely. I mean, and the other thing is the fact that she had to overcome her guilt for having that thrust upon her in terms of wanting to develop her own life. As a secondary aspect in this story, and the fact that she is on the verge of coming out as a young gay woman, but she can't bring herself to be fully open and honest with her family because she's afraid, not so much of admitting that she's gay, but of the fact that it's another potential burden I'm placing on my family at a time when they're dealing with enough stuff on their own. And it causes some friction between her and the woman with whom she's developing a relationship.
Yeah.
And she's kind of caught in between a rock and a hard place in terms of how much do I give, but how much do I give to myself at the same time?
And the school she chose, like she said, it was the Harvard of art schools. And so it was very expensive. It was like $10,000 a semester. Her father was a construction crew manager or something like that. But even though she got a full, ride scholarship to the university, they still had to pay for housing, and food, and all of that, which is expensive. in California, away, thousands of miles away from her home. And so that was an extra burden on the father too. He's like, I can't afford that. And he goes like, but they did it. They did it for her.
Yes.
And so he has to work a little bit later, which means mom has to spend more time with the son, which she doesn't really mind, but it's exhausting. It's exhausting to really look at him.
And mom gave up her career to care for him too. I mean, she had been an interior designer and said, I got to spend my time taking care of the kid,
And the boy was increasingly emotional, let's say, or getting a little volatile, getting stronger. He's big, just a little bit of like this, mom can go flying. And he was in a special ed class, but there was only one teacher and she just couldn't really handle him all the time. So it was a very dicey situation.
And the fact that, he was almost 18. So, I mean, you're raising the question of like, what are you looking at for the future? I mean, the folks and his older sister aren't going to be around him forever. So, I mean, how do you start to teach him some independence and autonomy as well, which they seem to have some kind of mixed results with, but I mean,
the father wanted to talk about a home. The mom's like, absolutely not. I'm not putting him in a home. He's our son. We love him. Yeah. But, there comes a time when it becomes too much for one person or even just a couple.
And also, what is the young man going to do when the parents are no longer in the picture? I mean, so raises a number of very challenging and difficult questions, but it's handled very sensitively. That's one of the things I loved about this movie is the fact that it didn't try to be sensationalist or exploitative or manipulative or schmaltzy. I mean, it was being very real, but being very sensitive at the same time. Yeah, and that's something I think is really to its credit for a first-time director as well. I mean, that's another thing that I was really impressed with.
It was it was kind of hard to watch. And my husband looked at me and said, could you handle him? And I said, you know what? Looking at him as he is right now, no. But knowing what it feels like to be a mom, and that's my child, yes. It's a different perspective. And, I know as a mom, I would do absolutely everything in my power to look after him. But as an outsider looking at this situation, I'm like, oh my God, I just couldn't handle this. It's just too much. Like, how do you do this every day, 24 hours a day? And not that you can't love him, but he was a challenging, he doesn't speak. He is in his own head. It's, it was hard. It was hard.
And also the fact that, I mean, his behavior could turn on a dime.
Yeah. You don't know what's going to challenge him.
Could be perfectly fine one minute and then perfectly emotionally out of control the next. Yeah. And I mean, what do you do about that? I mean, that's
hard to settle him down, hard to get him back to, a balance. And and then dad finally had to come home. He goes, you know what, mom's got to go to work. I got to come home because physically he could really hurt the mother.
Yeah.
He hurt her, and they couldn't trust that anymore.
The one thing I did like about this film too, though, is that when he did start to get emotionally out of control, it very effectively showed the techniques that the parents could use to calm him down and to get him settled and stabilized. And that's something that I can't recall ever seeing in any other films that have talked about the subject of autism.
In a real way. Yeah. Like it wasn't, you could tell that it was like something that he'd been trained to do. He understood it. It helped refocus him. Sister did it. Mom and dad did it. It was great. And unfortunately,
and I think that, there's a real credit to the writing in this in terms of the level of research that went into putting this script together to show these things in ways that really haven't been depicted in other films before.
Yeah, it was an excellent show. Really, really good film.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that kind of I find sometimes very frustrating is that it's a Canadian film. There's so many good films that come out from Canada that never get seen anywhere. I mean, this one was fortunate enough to be picked up at a number of film festivals and it drew enough attention that it ended up getting distribution contracts with Apple and with Amazon and a few other services. And, this is a way that, people can see these pictures that they might not ordinarily get a chance to do.
Yeah.
And I really wish there would happen more with Canadian films because there's so many good ones.
There's a lot of films being made in Canada from the US. And Willow is, the young girl, she is from Arizona. So I mean, I'm American cast, I imagine. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of films here. And usually in a Canadian film, in the past, it'd be like, oh, that's a Canadian film. There was such a flavor to it that you could tell it was Canadian.
Yeah.
You couldn't tell it was a Canadian film, which I think I give them credit for that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. They're better now. They're better now. I don't know how to explain it. I'm a Canadian, I can tell them. But yeah, it would be, oh, that's Canadian.
Well, I think one of the things I like about them so much is that they do have a very thoughtful approach in terms of the way they tell
it. It's a little different. Yeah.
And that's something that you don't see as much in a lot of independent American films.
Yeah.
So
and I think it has to do with our culture, in that our culture is very multicultural, even though the Americans are multicultural, not in the same way. Like, we are your culture first and then Canadian, where in the Americans, it's, you're an American and then you're Polish, yes, Irish, whatever you are. So here we celebrate the original culture, and it's not about assimilating as much as, not being separate, but being a part of the fabric of the culture, which
it's interesting you should say that, because years ago I was on vacation in British Columbia and I was talking to some people who were from Ontario, and they were telling me that the way they view the difference between Americans and Canadians is that in America, you talk about the melting pot where everybody comes together, where in Canada, they talk about everybody being part of the mosaic.
Right.
And I really like that analogy because I think it captured the difference really, really well.
Yeah. 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 And that's exactly it. You're part of the mosaic. And I like that. And so we're very, I was in Atlantic City a few months ago, and I opened a door and a guy came in or whatever. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. He goes, oh, you're Canadian. I go, well, give me a word. He goes, it was a sorry. So I think that we are very sensitive to other people, and in so many ways that Americans aren't. And so I see that sensitivity in this film.
And that's one of the reasons why I liked it so much. And I really encourage viewers to take a look at this if this is something that they're interested in. It's available for streaming on a couple of services, and I give it 4 out of 5.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Love it.
And then lastly, we have one more film that also deals with people in special needs, which I know you didn't care for as much as I did.
But I didn't, and I can't what happened. But hold on, where did you go? I'm sorry, guys. Keep talking. We'll talk.
Okay. So this is a film called Story Avenue, and it tells the story of a young at-risk graffiti artist who lives in the South Bronx, who is quite talented and has a potentially wonderful future ahead of him if he doesn't squander it. But he ends up kind of falling in with the wrong crowd, and it ends up really bringing out the at-risk nature of where he's at. And at one point, he ends up attempting to hold up a transit worker. And in many ways, I mean, he's really out of his league in trying to do this. He's a young, small guy, and he's trying to hold up this kind of heavy-set older guy who's very streetwise. Mm-hmm. And he's like, come on, don't try and pull this with me. You're not going to do this. And he ends up taking.
It's not, my sharing doesn't want to work at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, yeah.
But he ends up taking him under his wing and trying to help him straighten out his life and get on the straight and narrow and not squander this opportunity he has to develop his talents and become successful. But as much help as he gives him, there are things that are always tempting to draw him away from that.
Yeah.
And it's a struggle between how much am I going to stay committed to turning my life around versus giving in to the influences around me that are not in my best interest.
I think the death of his brother, would he have cerebral palsy or something? I can't remember.
I believe so, yes.
His brother passed away, and he felt responsible and was being, actually, some people thought that he was responsible for the death of his brother. And so, I think that really weighed heavy on him, the guilt of that. Yes. And to me, like I like the actor, what's his name? Is it
Luis Guzman?
Guzman? Yeah.
Yeah.
I love him, and he always makes me cry for some reason. There's just something beautiful about his spirit. But it did feel to me more like a made-for-TV movie than what it was. But the concept, everything about it, yes. You know, being able to help this young person and recognizing that there's something more in him and for him. He was not a gangster type, even though he was trying to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just wasn't him.
Well, this was a first time film for the director. So I mean, he's still developing his talents. But it played at the I believe it was the Sundance Film Festival last year, and was a big fan favorite.
Okay.
I think again because of sort of the universality of the theme that they could relate to. There were aspects of the film that I thought were a little on the predictable side. So I mean, that was one thing. Yeah, I mean, that's probably where the made for TV idea kind of came into play.
Yeah.
But you know, again, it's a new director. He's developing his style. He's developing his craft at this point. I think in terms of the way it was filmed and the way it was edited, was very well done. I thought the performances were terrific.
It's definitely got value. Don't take my comment away from that. The value of watching it, and it's a family film too. Really,
yeah.
You can watch it with your kids.
Well, I was not only impressed with Guzman, as I always am, but I was also impressed with the kid who played the young artist.
Yeah,
Asante Black. I believe he's somebody who came out of the Disney camp.
Okay.
And is now kind of stretching his wings a little bit. And a lot of times the people who come out of the Disney camp, they kind of get branded, for life as like, oh yeah, you're going to be like one of these obnoxious little kids on your Disney Channel shows.
Yeah.
But he's not. He broke out in this role. And I mean, I was impressed with the fact that he was showing some very genuine emotion in a couple of scenes. And I really like the scene where he was attempting the holdup, because it just showed how much out of his league he was at trying to do this.
Exactly.
I mean, he reminded me of the old chicken hawk from the Warner Brothers cartoons.
That's funny.
So yeah, this is a good one. The one kind of technical issue I had with this film also is that I found, particularly toward the beginning, the sound quality really could have used some work. I mean, I was kind of struggling to hear some of what was being said. And I know they were trying to be authentic for the culture he comes out of, but by the same token, it's like, could you repeat that? I mean, maybe it's a failing on my part, but I really felt that was something that could have been shored up a little bit.
I agree with that. Yeah.
But all of that aside, I'm going to give this one, because of the message and the merits it has to offer, I'm going to give this one 3.5.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. There's some. Did you ever get to see the DiCaprio one?
No, because it has not come to streaming yet, and that's what I'm waiting for at this point, because
me too.
I can't see myself sitting in the theater for 3 hours and 26 minutes without an intermission.
No.
And also, it's interesting you should bring this up, because I actually want to make a little bit of a commentary on this, and the fact that there were some theaters that were implementing their own intermissions for people because people wanted it. And Scorsese and the distributors came down hard on them for that, saying this violates your agreement with us for showing this, and we think it's just wrong that you're doing it, and people should be able to sit through this for this length. And I'm thinking to myself, how dare they say that?
Yeah.
I mean, I was really pretty annoyed with that attitude, because years ago there were movies far shorter than this that had intermissions, and this one doesn't.
I don't know what they think are going to take away from it, but I'm sure there could have been a spot in it where it could have stopped.
Yeah, absolutely.
It happens in plays. I went to a 2-hour play. There's a 20-minute intermission. Doesn't even have to be 20 minutes. Let people go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And that's the theaters get their money from the concession. And so if they can't sell concession, no good. Nobody's going to buy a drink because they're not going to be able to sit 4 hours.
Well, the other thing too is that, you know, this is the kind of film that's going to probably appeal more to an older audience.
Yes.
And older audiences are the ones that more likely need to have an intermission.
Yes.
These older audiences are the ones that are still staying away from theaters more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people like yours truly who have said, I'm just going to wait for it to come to
Yes.
streaming.
Me too. I'm not sitting that long in a movie theater without an intermission.
It's interesting when you talk about the length on some of these things, because the other movie that just came out, Napoleon, that's like 2 hours and 40 minutes. And one of the things that's being offered up as a criticism is that it feels like it was cut and feels like it was short.
Mm.
Well, I found out that the original director's cut of this was 4 hours.
Okay.
Now, if you're going to have a 4-hour movie, you better damn well have an intermission in it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, it's kind of a shame, because I think to a certain degree, maybe in the term trying to cut it down, they were trying to accommodate, you know, an audience with a less tolerant attention span than what would be needed for sitting through a 4-hour movie. I would love to see the 4-hour version, but I definitely would not see it in the theater if I didn't have an intermission.
Exactly.
You know, and this is a case where trying to be accommodating is affecting the artistic flow. You know, I mean, Napoleon's story is not something that you can tell, you know, in a couple of hours. I mean, it's something that really takes time to develop, and probably actually would have worked better as a miniseries and as a movie.
Yeah.
But if we're going to do it as a movie and it needs to be that long to tell the story effectively, well, then do it, but make sure you incorporate all the logistics into it to make it work in a movie theatrical format.
Yeah, and I'd want it to be in a theater where they have the recliner seats and stuff. You want to be able to put your feet up a little bit. 4 hours is not healthy for people to sit and not move. It's not. So, you know, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. So they need to think about that, like you said, when they're making a movie. I like a book that's going to be that long, you know, but a movie, 2.5 hours is kind of my attention span, unless it's amazing. Like, what's that one? Oh, I can't even remember the name of it now. It was a really long movie, but I loved it. Anyway, there's another movie coming out soon, and I can't remember. I can just remember the feel of going, oh, that's going to be so good. But I can't remember.
Well, there is one that's opening in limited release this coming weekend called Maestro. And that's a film that's about the romantic relationship of Leonard Bernstein and his wife. It's a movie directed by Bradley Cooper. He also stars in it. His romantic interest, the woman, is played by Carey Mulligan. It's produced by Steven Spielberg. This is a movie that's getting a lot of award season buzz. It's a little bit over 2 hours, but like I say, it's going to be in theaters this weekend, and it's going to be available for streaming later in December. So it looks like it's a good one. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
That sounds very good.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming out now in the next few weeks. I mean, award season is really heated up. And you've had a little bit of a backlog because of the actors' strike, where some of the dates got moved back. So you're going to see a lot of things coming out in a very concentrated period of time. It may be difficult for some viewers to figure out, what do I actually want to go see? I've got so many choices. You know? But you know, keep an eye on what's playing in the theaters. Keep an eye on when they're going to go to streaming. You can find out information on that on websites like imdb.com, where you see release dates. I know, for example, that both Napoleon